Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to look at the question of when does Werewolf by Night appear in the MCU timeline? Now, this will have a few small spoilers about the presentation, so if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend watching it first, and it is awesome. Awesome. But anyway, assuming you've seen the special presentation, then let's dive right in and see if we can place Werewolf by Night in the MCU timeline. Now, we always start with Disney Plus because that gives us the order. And according to Disney Plus, it is the last thing in the timeline that's been released so far. So after Ms. Marvel and Thor: Love and Thunder. And then we can kind of deduce when it's happening by looking at the fact that Ms. Marvel, we know, is at the beginning of her junior year, so September timeframe of 2025. And Thor: Love and Thunder follows that and seems to be, late fall, so we'll call it October 2025, and that works perfectly if Werewolf by Night is in late October of 2025, right around Halloween. It's perfect. So there you have it, shortest video ever. Or is it? Is maybe the question not so much when in the timeline is it occurring, but which timeline is it occurring? So let's dive into that just a little bit. I'm going to throw out the question of, is Werewolf by Night in the 616 universe? Now, I love the werewolf character. He was great, but I want to focus on Man-Thing for the minute because there's some very interesting things potentially going to be going on with him. Now, in the MCU, he's not really been introduced yet, or, well, theoretically not. He was maybe on the Hall of Heroes there, the Warriors in Thor Ragnarok. I kind of suspect that was just a little Easter egg thrown in to be fun, and now Marvel's going to go, yeah, that just looked like Man-Thing. That wasn't really Man-Thing. Or maybe it was, right? Maybe he showed up on Sakaar and kicked some butt in the battle chamber. That would be sweet. I'd love to see that, right? But I'm going to kind of assume that that's not Man-Thing for the time being, and that this is his first introduction in the MCU. So therefore, we don't really know much about what the MCU is going to do with him. However, if we look to the comics, we might get some hints, because in the comics, Man-Thing guards something called the Nexus of all realities. Sounds pretty cool, right? Basically, it lets you go in between universes, and he's the primary guardian of that. I kind of think of it as that space where the Watcher was hanging out in What If. He's not really in any of the universes. He's in between them, and he's able to just peer in and watch and observe. In fact, who knows? Maybe the Nexus of all realities that Man-Thing guards is the same place the Watcher's hanging out. Maybe they have tea, every Friday. Lots of stuff to explore here. We just don't know where the MCU is going to take Man-Thing, but the potential is really strong for the Man-Thing to be vital to the multiverse story that's unfolding. So it's a perfect time for Man-Thing to be introduced. And it really does raise that question of where exactly do we leave Man-Thing and Werewolf at the end of the special? I mean, they're just kind of hanging out there, but hanging out where? Is this 616, or is this maybe a different universe? Is it maybe a monster universe? Because it is interesting that they have all the story of the monsters that have been hunted. Hundreds have been killed by these hunters, the Bloodstone legacy. A lot of things where you're kind of going, why have we never heard of this before? But that's because potentially we haven't heard of it because it's not in 616. They're in a different universe. And maybe we'll see them end up colliding with our universe as the multiverse saga continues on. Because, of course, they could use the Nexus to go in between at any point, but also Secret Wars may pull everything together. I mean, if you look at all that junk sitting around them, who knows? Maybe they collected a lot of those things from different universes, even different times. So, yeah, a lot to explore here. It'll be interesting to see, if they're tied at all with Blade, because they showed vampires on the walls, at least what seemed like it. And so wouldn't they have mentioned Blade? But Blade does seem to be part of 616. Obviously, Blade appeared, or we heard him, at the end of Eternals. So I think Blade is definitely part of 616. But I wonder if this monster universe is in a separate universe. So we'll see. Don't have any real idea at this point, but lots of interesting things to at least consider. So one of the other things I've been doing with these timeline videos is not just placing the current things that have been released, but even looking at the future things, everything that's been officially announced as part of the rest of Phase 4 and then all of Phase 5 and a good part of Phase 6, just taking guesses and putting it on the timeline. So, one would think, right? One would think, surely I got this one right. I mean, how hard is it to place Werewolf by... well, okay, so I was off by 50 years. Good start, huh? The first one I place, right? The first one to come out after I do this, I'm off by 50 years. Okay, so, I thought it was a period piece. I'll be honest, I really did. But it turns out that the reason it felt so different is because maybe it's not part of our universe. Maybe that's what it was that felt so different. I just kind of thought it was earlier in time. But anyway, I got it wrong. So I will mention that if you want to know more about how I built out this timeline, I will have links to the videos later. I'm not going to go into all the details here, though, because I don't want to repeat what I did in that earlier video. But I am going to fix Werewolf by Night. We're going to take it out of here and shift everything earlier. Goodbye, Werewolf by Night. And then we're going to move past May and into October, where we now have Werewolf by Night properly placed. Wow. Hopefully I will get the next ones more correct than off by 50 years. So you notice the rest of Phase 5 and 6 that's been announced is down below, including, I've now put in Deadpool. That actually came out after I did my last video, so I have placed it after Fantastic Four, but before Secret Wars, because I don't think we're going to see much of Deadpool prior to Secret Wars other than his own movie. But I do think he's going to pop up then in Secret Wars. But we'll see. You never know. And then one other thing I want to point out, too, that I've learned since doing the timeline video is the Marvels. So we know what happens after Miss Marvel. In fact, it seems like it's right after Miss Marvel, because there's that ending scene where Miss Marvel swaps places with Captain Marvel. And that's going to pick up in the Marvels movie. But I've also been hearing that Valkyrie is going to appear in the Marvels. It's a rumor at this point, but it would be cool to see Valkyrie and Captain Marvel hanging out together, because that's been rumored that they would get to meet each other at some point. Well, if so, if that's true, then that would place the Marvels likely after Thor: Love and Thunder, which gets tricky since it should happen right after Miss Marvel. Well, or should it? Real quickly, if we look at the two ending scenes in Miss Marvel, there's the scene where Bruno tells her that basically she's a mutant. He doesn't use that phrase, but we all know that's what they're implying. And then there's the scene where Kamala switches places with Captain Marvel. Now we know the scene with Bruno, the one on the left, is only 1 week after the main part of the Miss Marvel show. However, they don't really tell us how much of a gap in time there is before this end credit scene where she swaps with Captain Marvel. And if you think of movies like Thor Ragnarok, there was a huge gap in time between the main movie and then that ending credit scene where they encounter Thanos' ship. In fact, it was several months. Likewise, there may be several months between these two scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and revise where I think the Marvels fits, and I'm going to move it all the way to the end of Kamala's school year in June of 2025 for two reasons. It puts it after Miss Marvel and after Thor: Love and Thunder, but also the movies for the most part continue to progress forward along the timeline. The TV shows are all over the place, but the movies seem to move forward, so this would place the Marvels after the release just prior to it, which is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So for now, I'm going to move the Marvels there, and I'll just continue to update this each time we learn more information and or more stuff comes out on Disney+. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Like it if you don't mind, subscribe if you haven't already. You can see the links to some of the earlier timeline videos, and let's all continue to enjoy the ever-expanding, ever timeline-altering Marvel Cinematic Universe.